Welcome to the RevRx podcast. My name's Chad Potts. I'm your host, and I'm so excited today to bring you a very special guest for episode 9. But before we get to her, I want to mention that we're almost to our 10th episode, which I'm so excited about. Double digits are almost here. And in anticipation of that, you'll want to go ahead and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find either me personally, Chad Potts, or RevRx Wellness Consulting. You'll want to go ahead and give us a follow or friend request or whatever that looks like for you, because it's going to be on those pages that we're going to be hosting this contest. And I'm doing a big merch giveaway. I've got swag, I've got hats and T-shirts, coffee cups, you name it. We're going to be giving those out in celebration of episode number 10. So go ahead and give us a follow. And hey, while you're at it, if you haven't already rated us or reviewed us on your podcast platform, go ahead and do that. What that does is helps small podcasts like this gain reach. It helps people find us. It helps people find the message that I'm putting out about faith, family, and health. So if you could help us out in those ways, we would appreciate it. Can't wait for what we're going to see happening down the road as we approach double digits with our episodes. Today, however, we don't want to skip, because episode 9 is a great one. You're going to want to listen to this one all the way to the end, because today we have a very special guest, Miss Whitney Prude. Whitney is a clinical pharmacist. She's board certified. She also is certified as a wellness coach. You're going to hear her story. You're going to learn how health, or the lack of, impacted her life. You're also going to learn about what it looks like to really and truly find health in a sustainable way. In today's world, there's so many diets out there, there's so many gimmicks, but we lack the ability to sustain our health, sustain our weight loss. And so we're going to dig into some of the root causes of why we can't seem to lose weight and keep it off. We're going to talk about movement. We're going to talk about all of those great things, but stay tuned until the very end. You're going to love the story that Whitney tells and the ways that she's able to explain to us that health really works inside our body. She has the ability as a medical practitioner to be able to explain things scientifically, but in a way that's very approachable. In a way that everybody can understand. So stay tuned. It's going to be a great episode. Without further delay, I want to introduce you to my friend, Whitney Prude. Thank you for joining us today, Whitney, on the RevRx podcast. Excited to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. And so it's refreshing to find another pharmacist who really understands that, hey, there's a role for medication out there, but a lot of times we're too quick to jump to that. And so a lot of your approach towards health, overall well-being, is a little bit different than the traditional healthcare model. So that's one of the things that drew me to you, and that's going to kind of guide our conversation today. But before we get started with your coaching and some of the things that you teach, can you just tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up where you are today?
Big question.
Yeah, loaded question, right?
So, well, usually when I share my story, I go back to when I was a teenager, because really that's kind of when things started to fall apart for me, I guess. A lot of times our story starts when things start to fall apart.
Absolutely. Yep.
When I was a teenager, my parents went through a divorce, and for me, it was very, very devastating. It was very challenging, and that was really the first time in my life that I realized that life doesn't always turn out how you think that it should, or how you want it to. And so, as a teenager, I felt like my whole world had crumbled. My closest relationships were in shambles. I was incredibly hurt. How could my parents do this?
Sure.
My family was completely torn apart, and nobody really teaches us how to go through these things, how to handle them in a healthy way, and how to deal with them, how to process them. And so I did what most humans do, and I started, I shoved down, buried the pain, buried the hurt. And I decided that there was one thing that I wasn't going to let go. I wasn't going to let this situation ruin. And that was actually my dream of becoming a pharmacist. And I don't know why in the world it's like as a teenager, it's like, why would I go to that? Right. It's like,
Mhm.
usually, you'd rebel, you would do, start doing all sorts of crazy things. And I remember I had this moment where I was like, hey, you know what? Like, I know who I am. I know what I want. And like, I'm not going to let this take it away. So I had decided that, but I also used it essentially as a coping mechanism, as a way of making it through. And so what I did is I became hyper focused on becoming a pharmacist, on getting really good grades, on being really successful, and overachieving essentially.
Mhm.
Right, that kind of became my sense of self-worth, of like, people would look at me like, oh gosh, look at what Whitney's accomplishing, she's so successful, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of like where my self-worth came from, was accomplishing those things, and getting to the top essentially.
Yeah, I relate so much to that. Oh, a lot of times we let other people's opinions of us become our self worth, and it's just kind of how we as humans do things. A lot of times, there's no field manual for how to deal with the stresses and hardships of life. But yeah, at least you turned that into a positive. So
I tried. I tried, but it wasn't all positive,
true,
right?
true.
So I mean, I buried myself. I
Mhm.
buried myself in just being really busy with pharmacy, and accomplishing and achieving, essentially what I considered to be my dream, right? Once I got into pharmacy school, I mean, I remember very vividly, I had a day where it was towards the end of my first year in pharmacy school, and I completely crumbled. I mean, like literally crumbled to the floor, sobbing, very, very devastated. And I I realized in that moment, that was kind of the first moment where I was like, I'm not okay. It was the
Yeah,
first time I was willing to admit to myself that I wasn't okay, that there were things that were wrong, and it wasn't pharmacy. It was everything that I had buried, right?
yeah,
That I was
yeah.
trying to cover up with pharmacy. So, like, going through pharmacy school for me was so overwhelming and so awful, essentially, that it made it so that I wasn't able to cover up
Sure.
all of the pain and all of the hurt anymore. I wasn't able to, keep that below the surface. So it all came up
Hmm.
and presented itself in, mental and emotional meltdowns, and some physical pain, and different things like that. And I really, at that point when I decided, I'm not okay, I started going to therapy. I started reading self-help books. It's like, I've got to figure it out,
Sure.
because I'm very unhealthy, mentally, and becoming physically unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I did survive pharmacy school,
Mhm.
but I spent a lot of years trying to work through these mental and emotional struggles. And by the time I got my first job as a pharmacist, I got my first job at the Mayo Clinic, which is like, oh, awesome, dream come true. I made it. I'm
Yeah.
here. And about 9 months into my first job, my career, I started to get a pain in my wrists, doing computer work, verifying orders, checking medications. And I thought, I'll let him rest, give it a couple weeks, everything will be back to normal. And within about 2 months, I was nearly bedridden.
Oh wow.
I was, very, very fatigued, in a lot of pain. And I found myself in a rheumatologist's office.
Mm.
And, I realized at that point that my life was never going to be the same.
Wow.
um, it it had pretty much been turned upside down. I used
Hmm.
to be a very active person, and pretty much had to give up all of my hobbies. And I ride a scooter. I'm in a wheelchair. I have a handicap pass. It really turned my active lifestyle upside down. And the part that really bothers me, that in the back of my mind, I always think to myself, what if I had lived differently?
Mm.
What if I had lived differently back then? I had known how to take care of myself, had managed my mental health appropriately. Um, what if? How would my life be different now? Would I be dealing with all of this? Would I be limited for the rest of my life?
Sure.
And so, while I was sick and in bed, for months and months on end, I started to create a program, essentially. And the whole purpose was to help other people to not have to ask that same question.
Wow.
Get down the road and say, what if I had lived differently then? How would my
Hmm.
life be different now? What if we could prevent that?
Yeah.
What if you never had to get to that point?
Wow.
And so at that point, I had to figure out, if I can't be a pharmacist, what am I going to do to pay off my student loans?
Yeah.
What am I, like what next? And so that really became my passion. I built a program and I really help people through the journey of, what are the mental and emotional things that are keeping them stuck? How do we get them to a really healthy place? And a lot of times, instead of manifesting as an autoimmune disease, it manifests as, people gaining weight.
Yeah.
And so, I'll take people through our program to lose weight, but also to make sure that we're addressing the underlying things so that they can make sure they can maintain it long term. It's really a lifestyle transformation.
Yeah, and it's that story that drew me to you when I first came across what you're doing and everything. There's a lot of lifestyle coaches out there, but there's something that makes you unique, and it's the fact that you've lived this out. Um, and there's so much to unpack there, and this I could probably spend a whole podcast about it. My pastor brain's going crazy right now with like, oh man, there's so many things
Dig
we can talk
in,
about,
dig
the
in.
realities of life, and it being different than how we expected. So you're going through your teen years, and life looks different than you expected because you never expected your parents to divorce. Those are the two probably closest people to you, and then now that looks different. Um, and you channeled that in a positive way, or so you thought. You channeled that in a way that made you driven, made you passionate about your career choice. And I'd mentioned, hey, that's a positive thing. It's more positive than some other things you could have done, but ultimately, it was just that repression of what you were feeling. I feel pain, but I don't want to feel pain, and I'm going to do whatever I can possibly do to not feel that pain anymore. That's what we as humans do. That's how we handle that. Um, and people handle that different ways. It leads some towards substance abuse. It leads towards some towards alternative lifestyles, and whatever. It led you towards something that on the surface looked positive. I'm going to be a pharmacist. I'm going to help other people, but in an unhealthy way. The way you went about it was unhealthy because you were beginning to see your self worth in what other people thought of you. And I've always had perfectionist tendencies. Um, just this tendency to just really want to be my best. And if I'm really honest, it wasn't just because I want to be my best, but it's because I want people to notice that I'm the best. And it
Yep.
wasn't. I've never, and it was never from an arrogant standpoint. It was always from an insecure standpoint.
Right.
Um, I think there's two ways of looking at that, but it's almost like you're trying to buy your worth. You're trying to earn your worth by performance. And that's never a healthy thing. And it hasn't been until the last few years I've been able to unpack that myself. But yeah, so there's this stress. It's building up in you. It leads you to, some breakdowns naturally. I mean, that, you kind of came to the point where you had to say, I'm not okay. And I guess kind of something to think about there as we're, the purpose of this is to bring awareness to, normalize conversations about this in order to help other people who may be experiencing some of the same things. If there's something we're not dealing with on the inside and we're trying to avoid and we don't want to talk about it and we don't want to feel it and we're repressing that, it's gonna come out eventually, right? Like that seems like that's kind of what you learn. It's gonna come out eventually, not always in a great way. Um, so you struggled through pharmacy school. Pharmacy school is hard enough um, without the added stressors of that. So I get that. I can
Right.
I can
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. Then you launch into, wow, Mayo Clinic pharmacist, top notch. Keep on achieving, keep on achieving. I mean, you're off the charts here. And then something happens and you can't do that anymore. Again, life looks different for you than what you had expected it to look like. But yet, one thing that I really love about what you've done in both of those situations is you've been able to channel that frustration and that disappointment into something positive. And again, we see you, okay, you've healed from some of the stuff perhaps before, and you've learned from it. And now you're able to channel this frustration, this disappointment into a pivot. Life's full of pivots. We have to learn how to, all right, when life hands you something that is outside of your control, which it will inevitably,
Yep.
learning to, all right, where can I go from here? And then that led to your coaching business. So there's so much to like there. There's so much you've been through, and there's so many ways you can help other people. And I'm a big believer in the things we've been delivered from, the things we've learned how to navigate. It's our responsibility at that point to be able to reach down and help those going through similar paths. And I love what you said about it doesn't always manifest itself in an autoimmune disease. Stress is a major factor for a lot of those. And the stress that you've been carrying around from some of this, you can't help but wonder, could that have contributed? But a lot of times, stress leads to other behaviors, right?
Yep.
Self-sabotage behaviors. And so talk about that a little bit if you can. What are some things you see that this repressed stress that, we don't want to handle it. Life has just given us a lot of challenges. So here's how we're going to cope with it, but it's not always a good thing. Weight gain, that sort of thing. What do you see from your coaching perspective?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, if you think about stress, the first thing that I think about is what it does to our bodies, right?
Yeah.
From a biological standpoint. And when we're stressed and we're chronically stressed, our cortisol increases.
Yep.
When our cortisol increases, basically our body is saying, okay, we're in a stressful situation and we need to start conserving energy to make sure that we can survive.
Yeah.
So that in itself, right, with stress can start causing some weight gain. But then what do we do? How do we actually deal with the stress? Well, most people turn to something to try and soothe that stress. And the easiest thing to turn to is food.
Yeah. And, that instinct in us, the cortisol serves an important role. That instinct served us great when we're having to fight off tigers and, the hunters and gatherers. And, you think back in humanity's past, we need to conserve energy so that we'll have the energy to do whatever it takes to survive. But nowadays, we're not fighting tigers. Most of us aren't.
Right.
But it's the stresses of life that cause that same instinct in us, that cause that same hormone to be produced, and then you have those byproducts.
Yep.
I just find that fascinating.
And I mean, it's just a chain reaction, right?
Yeah.
Because you have the stress, you have your cortisol increasing, you're potentially stress eating, but then you're so stressed that you've got your mind's going a million miles an hour, so you can't sleep well at night. Well, what happens when we don't have sleep and when we are stressed? Well, our cravings for fatty and salty and sugary foods increase. It's just a chain reaction, right?
Yeah.
And typically in our society today, we live very high stress, busy lives, and that is the norm.
Yeah.
Most people feel like if they're not constantly busy, they're worthless.
Yes.
They're completely wasting their time. They're a nobody. They're not accomplishing anything. And it's very, very detrimental to our health.
Yeah, the busier we are, the more important we are. Is kind of the way we equate that. And and there's this concept of, all right, so I had this constant stress in my life, and you nailed it, like working through all of the chain reactions. That's kind of the perfect storm. So the hormones in our body are telling us to conserve energy, and then we're stressed, so we're coping with stress with eating more food more frequently, more calories, and then we're not sleeping well, so then that our hunger cues are towards the things that are not good for us. And so it's just it's a perfect storm, but it's a terrible storm of just a recipe for weight gain, for unhappiness, and for really just kind of staying stuck.
Yep.
And so when someone's in that situation, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, Whitney, you come in as coach. And so one of the things, you teach basically 3 steps to lose weight. All right, but this is not just about the losing weight. The extra weight is not good. Extra weight is a risk factor for a lot of chronic diseases. But what you're aiming to do and what makes you unique is that you're aiming to do this in a way that can be maintained long term. So it's not just about getting the weight off, but it's addressing the things that cause the weight gain to start with, right?
Yep. I mean, I think you nailed it that, the majority of people experience exactly what we're talking about, right? Living high stress lives, and then the chain reaction happens, and all of a sudden, we're looking at ourselves in the mirror saying, what happened,
Right.
and how do I get out of it? And most people will try diets because they look at themselves in the mirror and say, well, I'm not happy with myself because I have this weight on. That's why I'm not happy.
Sure.
If I lost the weight, I would be happy. And so what do? Well, they start doing a bunch of these, fad diets, quick fixes, weight loss pills, you name it, right?
Yep.
There's thousands of different things that people do to try to bandage the real problem.
Right.
And it causes even more issues. It causes more issues when, with yo-yo dieting, and it makes it even harder for them to ultimately get to the goal that they want to.
Sure.
So what we do is, in terms of focusing on long-term results, we do the real work. We're not bandaging, right? We're digging into what are the root causes.
Yeah.
Why did we get here in the first place? Why are we staying stuck? What is it that's actually driving our behavior? Because I always talk to people, like, before I put someone in my program, and I say, well, if we got rid of all of the mental and emotional stuff, if we got rid of your emotional eating, your stress eating, we got rid of your anxiety, if we got rid of, your lack of sleep, we took all of these things and we got rid of them. They disappear. How challenging is it then for you to manage your physical health? It's really easy at that point, right? If you're not stress eating, and if you're completely aware of why you're doing the things that you're doing, and you're managing and regulating your own emotions, and you know how to show up for yourself, and you genuinely care about yourself from a deep, internal perspective, managing your physical health becomes easy.
Yeah.
And so that's what we focus on at the very beginning of our program. It's the most important thing that we could do for someone to help them to get long-term results. And that's overcoming the mental and emotional barriers that are keeping them stuck and that have gotten them to where they are in the first place.
I love that. There are so many things that we try to do without doing the hard work. It's much easier to say, all right, I'm going to go on this diet. And odds are you may have success on it, but you haven't changed anything about yourself. You haven't changed your habits, which we'll get to. You haven't overcome those barriers that are causing you to behave that way in the first place. And so what do you do immediately when you get off the diet? You put weight back on because the root cause has not changed. I love that. That's absolutely essential. And really, when you think about it, that is what keeps people trapped. It's not the fact that they're gaining weight. It's the fact that they haven't done the hard work to figure out why they're putting on the weight to start with. So, so number one is overcoming mental and emotional barriers, getting to the root of the issue. And then kind of comes the fun time, right? The fun work.
Yeah. So after that, then we dive into mastering nutrition and exercise. Okay. And there's a very specific reason why I say mastering, because if you look at all of these fad diets, the reality is that people aren't actually learning proper nutrition, and they're not actually learning how to change their lifestyle, and they're not actually learning how to do something that's maintainable long term.
Sure.
I mean, Weight Watchers, you know how to track points, but you still don't know the nutritional value of food. You still don't know really, what to choose, how to put it into your diet, how to lose weight in a healthy way. What are your macro? There's a million other things that you don't get when you do, Weight Watchers, intermittent fasting, keto. Keto puts you into ketosis, which is really not healthy for the human body anyways. We're not designed to function that way.
Right.
So there's any number of of diets that you can do, but the reality is that none of those are actually educating you on how to truly be healthy and know how to do nutrition, healthy weight loss, maintenance, exercise that you can maintain. You don't have to kill yourself at the gym, right? So there's a huge lack of knowledge of how to actually do this and just to live a healthy lifestyle.
Yes.
It's actually amazing to me how much work it takes to convince someone after they've yo-yo dieted for a certain amount of time to then have to convince someone how to just eat like a normal human being.
100%.
It blows my mind that this is actually how our bodies function.
Yeah.
This is how humans survive. This is how our bodies are designed to survive. and for people to wrap their mind around that after they've yo-yo dieted for so long is incredibly difficult.
Yep.
And now, they're looking at the scale and it's like, oh crap, like I've got to starve myself today because such and such, because it bumped up a pound or something. And it's ingrained. It becomes very, very ingrained with all the information on social media, everything that we have access to. Nobody knows what's true anymore or what's not, or what's the right thing to do. And people are all over the place.
And that's why I love professionals like you, because I mean, you understand the scientific rationale behind it. You understand the literature behind it, the science behind it. The internet is full of gimmicky diets, gimmicky solutions, easy buttons, what I call a lot of them. There is no easy button when it comes to your health. We're used to that, diet mentality. So I lost 50 pounds on that. And so but then it came back. And so then we blame it on, well, that diet didn't work for me. The problem is not that diet. It's like we're searching for that, that next thing that's going to be the answer.
Right.
And we're never going to find that until we do the hard work and then really begin to understand the foundations of nutrition and fitness. So yeah, it's amazing to me that people aren't more aware of how to take care of their bodies. I found a quote recently, and I can't remember who said it, but it basically said, "Take care of your body. It's the only place you had to live." We only get one of these, and yet the information we have about it seems minimal. I'm blown away by the fact that we learned all about parallelograms in school, but we did not learn how to properly take care of our bodies. And yeah, there was health class or whatever, but that wasn't nearly enough. But yeah, it's hard to get past this whole idea of looking for the next easy button that's going to fix me, and learning to become a master of your health, becoming a master of the nutrition and master of fitness. You mentioned moving into the fitness realm. You mentioned that you don't have to kill yourself in the gym. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like what's kind of expected as far as movement goes for a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah. I mean, if we're just talking about a healthy lifestyle, I mean, the first thing is get moving, right? Like even if that's getting out 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, go for a walk, start somewhere, right? A lot of people think that you have to start huge. Okay, tomorrow is the day I'm going to start going to the gym every single day, 5 days a week, and it's not realistic. There's no way you're going to stick to that. You might eventually work up to that and get to a point where you really love going to the gym, but you're not going to love that at the beginning, and you're not going to stick to it if you try to do too much all at once. And that's where, we really get into building habits, because a lot of times with my clients, so if I'm meeting with someone and we set a goal and they come back the next week and, it's like, hey, how's exercise going? They're like, oh, I didn't do it. It's like, okay, so let's set these goals, and when we come back the next week, it's like, how's exercise going? Oh, I didn't do it. At that point, we take a step back and we have to start asking why. Why are you putting this off? If you're putting it off multiple weeks in a row, we've got to start digging into why. Why are you actually putting it off? And so, a lot of times it's like, okay, so maybe it's too big. We start taking a step back. And instead of trying to do an actual workout, let's literally just get outside and walk your dog for 5 minutes. Like that's our starting point, right? Well, it's just a matter of finding the barriers. Every single person is unique and everyone's journey is going to be different. And so we customize exercise. There's not a single two people in our program
awesome.
that have the same exercise plan, because everyone's life is different. Their lifestyle is different. Their abilities are different. They have different limitations. They have different hobbies and things that they enjoy.
Sure.
Exercise can be anything. It's a matter of getting yourself moving. Some people, they walk, they get 10 to 15,000 steps a day at their job. When you move that much, like your exercise doesn't have to be that much above and beyond what you're already doing. It's just everyone is different. You got to get moving. Yes, we got to start small and build up and, build healthy habits. And then at that point, it's really a matter of what can you do consistently.
And we've created this
100%.
culture, the mainstream fitness industry, et cetera, to where workouts need to look a certain way. It needs to be reps and weights, and it needs to be, treadmills and bikes. And, that's what working out looks like. That's what exercising and fitness looks like, but it doesn't have to. And that's been one of the more freeing things for me in my journey, is realizing that getting outside and playing with my kids can be exercise. Jumping on the trampoline with them is exercise.
100%.
Just taking a walk is exercise. You think about in 100 years or so ago, they didn't have commercial gyms that are open 24/7 that you can go to and listen to your iPod, and that wasn't a thing. But yet people were in a lot better shape then than they are now, I'm convinced. And what was the difference? Well, they moved. This whole sedentary lifestyle thing is kind of a modern thing. A lot of our jobs are desk jobs now. A lot of people are, not moving at all throughout the day. And so there are some things that we can incorporate where it's not, okay, I've got to go from nothing to working out 5 days a week in the gym. Meeting people where they are is super important. And I love that you guys incorporate that as part of your plan. So there's overcoming the barriers, looking at the mental, emotional root causes, mastering nutrition and exercise. Those are kind of, you've got to get those things down. And then you mentioned it a minute ago, the habits, the long-term habits that make this sustainable for me. A lot of the diets and a lot of the fads, those are short-term things. And we get in our mind, okay, well, I've just got to do this for 30 days, for 60 days. And, then I'm magically going to have like a six pack or whatever they promise you. It's short-term mindset. Sometimes it's a challenge to go from that, if we're used to this yo-yo dieting, to long-term sustainability. But talk us through the habit phase of your plan.
Habits take time.
No easy button, huh?
First and foremost, that's just, there's no easy button for habits, and that's why people, they think, oh, I'm going to jump on board with this program. And they think, one day I'm living this way, and then the next day, like, everything changes. And the problem is when we really break down how habits develop. I mean, I always like to kind of paint this picture for people that, in our brains, we have billions of neurons. And every single day we're making, millions of connections between those neurons and the way that they're connecting. But what our brains do is our brains try to find the easiest path. So our brains will build connections, neuronal connections. And then the more those fire, where we're doing the same things over and over and over and over again, they thicken and they strengthen, and it becomes something that we don't even have to think about anymore. It's the path of least resistance is where our brain wants to go.
Really, really cool to me that our brains are made that way.
Absolutely. Right. Our brains are absolutely incredible, and they can work for us, or they can also work against us. But the thing is that those pathways do not change overnight. And I don't think they change in 21 days either. That's a common belief of, a new habit takes 21 days. Mm-hmm. It takes significantly longer than that to really, really build a new habit. Because, say, for example, you're doing something for 2 months and then you go on a week-long vacation. Well, I'll tell you what, when you get back from that week-long vacation, it's going to be really challenging to get back to what you were doing. Your brain is always going to want to go to those pathways that are really, really strong and just easy. The easiest pathway with the least amount of resistance. It's going to go directly there. And the challenge is that because we're human beings, we have a prefrontal cortex, and we can actually think through these things and evaluate and say, wait a second, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. I want to change my brain. And we have to persistently make ourselves create a new pathway and do it over and over and over and over and over again for an extended period of time until it becomes the path of least resistance.
Yes.
But that takes time. It takes time, and it's challenging. And I would say the absolute majority of human beings need someone to keep them accountable, because we don't stay accountable to ourselves. So in order to really develop those pathways and develop them in a way that they're strong enough that they actually become the path that when you go on vacation, you're like, gosh, I can't wait to get back to my old, what I was doing, right? The path of least resistance, you just get right back to what you were doing. That's the goal. But most people need help, and they need guidance, they need support, they need the accountability to make sure that they stick with it long enough that it actually becomes a part of who they are.
Those old pathways run deep. The way we've been doing things for our whole life is our default go-to. And so we're combating that, and so we're creating this new connection, these new habits that now are the ones that are going to serve us best moving forward. And we reintroduce them, reinforce them. But we still find ourselves fighting against those old ones because, hey, we've been doing that for years. And so it only makes sense that, it's going to take some time to overcome that. But eventually we can get to the place where that's our new default. That's our new normal. And that's where coaches come in. That's where accountability partners come in. And that's why people like you are so valuable, because you have the knowledge to be able to introduce the right habits, but then you have the know-how and the experience, and a lot of that is encouragement. A lot of that is redirection, because a lot of times when we fail, we get off track, we go back to those old habits. A lot of times we're hard on ourselves and we say, oh, I'm just a failure. Oh, I'm just, no, your brain is just doing what it's designed to do. You just have to fight against it. And so, realizing you're not weird, there's nothing broken with you, that's normal, but hey, let's get back. That's invaluable. And that's really, that is the key, I think, to long-term health, is the implementation of solid habits, getting rid of habits that no longer serve you, and creating new habits and reinforcing them to the point to where that becomes the new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as we get older, right, we get more stuck in our ways. I think of like one of my grandparents, coffee at this time in the morning. We wake up, then we have coffee, then we do this, and then lunch is at this time. And then, and it's like very structured. They do the same things. It's like, this is how I live, and nobody mess it up. Like, don't mess with this, right? But that's like 80 plus years of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And for someone to think that in 21 days, you are going to change those pathways that have developed over, however many years, is crazy, right? It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And so keeping that in mind is that, it took you, even if it took 5, 10, 15 years, that you've developed these habits and that they're ingrained in your brain, realize that those things aren't going to change overnight.
And so, the long game, that's what we're after. And the work that you're doing is fantastic. If there's someone listening that really wants to delve into your world, wants to find out more about the coaching that you do, can you give them, just kind of some links and some websites and where to find you?
Absolutely. So anyone's welcome to visit my website. It's mywholeandhappylife.com. And the best way to communicate with me, to find me, send me a message, and be able to talk back and forth with me and with my team is through Instagram. So that's at mywholeandhappylife.
Y'all check Whitney out. She's doing great work. I'm going to have the links in the show notes as well. So, but thanks so much. What an honor this has been. It's been a great conversation, and never know, we may have a part 2 here later. So,
thank you, Chad. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.